My mother-in-law smiled at my daughter, then pulled her hand back and said, "Oh no, not you, Emily. Maybe next time. If you behave better." No gift, no bracelet, just a cold dismissal in a room full of kids flashing gold. My 7-year-old Emily looked up at me, clutching her bunny, whispering, "Mommy, did I do something bad?" That was the moment my blood turned to fire. I almost walked out, but what happened next changed everything. Before I tell you how my husband shattered decades of silence, that day hit like, and tell me in the comments if you've ever watched someone you love be treated like they don't belong. Your words remind me I'm not alone. I'm Claire Thompson, 34, and for most of my life, I thought I'd married into a picture-perfect family. My husband, Mark, works in construction management, steady, reliable, the kind of man who never leaves a project unfinished. I work in an office downtown, juggling spreadsheets by day and bedtime stories by night. Together, we raise Emily, our 7-year-old, the brightest little soul I know. She has big brown eyes that always search for approval and a laugh that used to fill every corner of our house. But when it comes to family gatherings, nothing ever feels simple. Mark's mother runs them like she's the queen of some private kingdom. The big old house she lives in, the one with the creaky porch and the chandelier that hums when the air conditioner kicks on, becomes her stage. Every holiday, every so-called special gathering, it's the same ritual. She cooks up enough food to feed 3 churches lines the table with trays of cupcakes from Walmart, dressed up on her own china plates, and calls in all the cousins, nieces, and nephews like she's about to hand down a royal decree. At first, I thought these parties were harmless, even sweet, a family that cared enough to come together right. But underneath the laughter and the smell of baked ham, there was always that tension. The quiet measuring of who got what, who sat closest to Grandma, who was worth showing off. And the truth, Emily and I were always on the outside of that circle. Mark would squeeze my hand under the table, that silent warning that said, "Just play along." He grew up in this house, he knew the rules. His mother adored certain grandchildren, the ones who mirrored her pride or carried her name. The rest were tolerated. You could see it in the way she bent down to hug one child, then gave another a distracted pat on the head. Still, Emily never noticed. Not until this year. She was finally old enough to sense that being part of Grandma's special club meant more than a hug at the door. It meant inclusion, belonging. And when my mother-in-law sent out the invitations for this latest gathering, she didn't call it a party. She called it a surprise for all the grandchildren. Those words alone were enough to light Emily up for weeks. She'd come home from school talking about what it might be, maybe matching necklaces, maybe toys, maybe a secret adventure. And I let myself hope too. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe this family would prove me wrong. The day of the gathering felt like it had been circled on the calendar in red. Sunlight poured through the lace curtains in my mother-in-law's living room, catching on the framed photos of smiling grandkids lined up on her mantel. Every detail screamed of celebration balloons tied to the porch rail trays of food spread across the long oak table. Little cousins darting through the hall with their phones already recording. I held Emily's hand as we stepped inside. She was practically bouncing, her stuffed bunny tucked under her arm ears, frayed from years of love. "Do you think it's a puppy? Mommy?" she whispered, eyes wide. I laughed, even though the knot in my stomach told me better. Mark stood close, his jaw already tight. I could feel his discomfort without him saying a word. He knew better than anyone how quickly these parties turned from warm to cruel. He'd lived it as a boy, being the one overlooked, the one who watched other kids unwrapping shiny things, while he pretended not to care. Still, we stayed. That's what you do. When it's family, you sit on couches that aren't yours, you smile politely, and you pray no one notices the cracks. My mother-in-law entered like a performer making her grand debut. She carried a stack of small velvet boxes in her arms, each one identical and perfect. Gasps spread across the room. The whispers started, bracelets, maybe jewelry. The cousins leaned forward, eyes sparkling. phones lifted higher. She opened the first box and handed it to my nephew, a delicate gold bracelet with his initials engraved. So precious, she cooed, kissing his cheek. Another box, another bracelet, another round of squeals. The line of children seemed endless, each one walking away with their prize, their place secured. I felt Emily's grip on my arm tighten. She sat up straighter, pressing her bunny against her chest, waiting. Her turn was coming. She believed it with all her heart, and that's when it happened. My mother-in-law reached the last box. She paused, glanced at Emily, then pulled her hand back as if the gift itself might burn her. Her smile turned sharp. "Oh no, not you, Emily. Maybe next time, if you behave better." The words sliced through the air. Cameras lowered. The kids shifted uneasily. Emily's lips parted, trembling. She looked at me, eyes brimming, and whispered so soft it broke me in half. "Mommy, did I do something bad?" That was the turning point. My blood surged hot. I wanted to grab her hand to march us out the door and slam it behind us. But Mark caught my arm before I could rise. His voice was low, controlled, but it carried a weight I'd never heard before. "Wait," he whispered. "Just wait." The chatter around us stumbled forward, forced and hollow. Parents murmured, trying to distract their kids. But the air in that room had changed. I could feel it. Mark disappeared up the stairs, leaving me clutching Emily, my heart hammering. I didn't know what he was planning, but I knew one thing: this was no longer just a family gathering. Something was about to break wide open. I sat frozen on that sofa, Emily pressed into my side like she was trying to disappear into me. The bracelet boxes were gone now, dangling from the wrists of every other child in the room. Their parents forced smiles, snapping pictures with stiff voices, pretending everything was still festive. But no one looked at us. No one dared. Emily's little fingers dug into my arm. Her stuffed bunny's worn ears brushed against my elbow. She hadn't spoken another word since whispering that question. Did I do something bad? My chest felt crushed under the weight of it. I wanted to stand, to grab her hand, walk out of that house, slam the door behind us, and never look back. I shifted forward, ready to move, when Mark's hand caught my wrist. "Wait," he whispered, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Mark." I started, but his eyes locked on mine with an intensity that stopped me cold. I saw something there I hadn't seen in years. Not resignation, not fear, but resolve. He stood up slowly, shoulders squared, fists still clenched. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the staircase. The room barely noticed my mother-in-law was fussing over the cousins adjusting bracelets, demanding they hold up their wrists for photos. The adults murmured shallow compliments. Laughter rose and died in the same breath. But I noticed. I tracked every step Mark took up those stairs, my heart hammering so loud I thought people might hear it. 10 long minutes passed, 10 minutes of me sitting stiff on that sofa, Emily's cheek buried in my side, my throat burning from unshed tears. Every second stretched like an hour. Around us, the party clattered forward, but the air felt poisoned heavy. Even the chandelier's faint hum seemed louder than the fake laughter. Then I heard footsteps. Deliberate, slow. Mark appeared at the top of the staircase, a small wooden box in his hands. Not flashy, not decorated, just plain dark wood worn at the corners. I had never seen it before. His face gave nothing away, but the energy rolling off him was undeniable. Conversations faltered as he descended. Phones lowered. Even the children went still, their new bracelets forgotten. My mother-in-law finally turned, eyes narrowing at the sight of her son carrying that box. He didn't look at anyone else. He walked straight to her, his steps steady, his grip firm around the box. "Mom," he said, his voice low but cutting through the silence like thunder, "do you remember Dad's pocket watch?" Her expression flickered just for a second. Of course. Why, Mark didn't answer her. Not yet. He set the box on the coffee table, opened the lid, and inside lay a gleaming gold watch. The very one his father had worn every single day until the day he died. Gasps rippled through the room. I covered my mouth, Emily lifting her head to see. Mark's voice was steady, but I caught the crack beneath it. Dad gave this to me before he passed. He told me to give it to someone who deserves it, someone who understands family, and then he turned. Not to me, not to his mother, to Emily. Her eyes widened, lips parting in disbelief. For me, she whispered. Mark knelt down right there in front of everyone. Yes, sweetheart. For you, because you do deserve it, because you are part of this family, because no one will ever make you feel like you're not. Tears spilled down her cheeks. My own vision blurred. The room had gone silent, but it was the kind of silence that trembles before it breaks, and I knew the counterattack had begun. Mark's words didn't just hang in the air, they detonated. The room that had been buzzing with shallow laughter now sat hollow, every eye glued to him, on one knee in front of Emily. My daughter's tiny hands trembled as she clutched the watch like it was made of starlight. Across the room, my mother-in-law's face hardened. She forced a brittle smile, the kind you paste on when the mask is slipping. Mark, she said, voice tight. That's not appropriate. It's an heirloom. It's meant for someone who understands family. Mark cut in, his voice rising above hers. He stood slowly towering over her, the wooden box still open on the table, the truth gleaming inside it. Dad trusted me to decide, and I just did. Gasps fluttered again. My sister-in-law's phone, halfway lifted to snap a picture, froze mid-air. The cousins shifted uneasily, bracelets jangling. I felt my breath catch. For years, Mark had bitten his tongue at these gatherings, letting his mother orchestrate her pageants of favoritism, never once stepping out of line. But this time he was done. His mother's eyes darted around, searching for support. "You're overreacting," she hissed, the smile dropping. "It was just a playful moment. Emily will get something next time." Emily's shoulders slumped, her small voice breaking. "But Grandma, why not me this time?" Every adult winced. The words of a child had done what none of us dared, shoved the cruelty into the light. Mark's fists tightened. "Don't you dare put that weight on her shoulders. She's 7 years old. She's not here to earn your approval like some contestant. She's your granddaughter, and she deserves love, not conditions." My mother-in-law straightened her chin, lifting with the old arrogance. "Don't lecture me about family, Mark. I built this house. I held this family together after your father died. I decide what tradition looks like." Mark stepped closer, his voice low but thunderous. "Tradition is humiliation. A tradition is shaming children until they break part of the legacy you're so proud of." Her mouth opened, but no words came. The silence stretched. Then my brother-in-law, shifting awkwardly near the fireplace, spoke for the first time. "Mom, that was pretty harsh. You shouldn't have said that to Emily. It was like a crack in a dam." My sister-in-law stepped forward, her hand resting gently on Emily's shoulder. "That's a beautiful watch, sweetheart," she said softly. "You deserve it." One cousin lowered his bracelet, suddenly less eager to flaunt it. Another kid murmured, "Why didn't Grandma give her one too?" Parents exchanged uneasy looks, the perfect facade collapsing piece by piece. Mark turned back to his mother, his voice steady, now controlled. "This ends here. You will not make my daughter feel like she's less than. Not in this house. Not anywhere." Her lips trembled, the confidence draining. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked small. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did," Mark said sharply, cutting her off. His words landed like a hammer. "You've meant it for years. You did it to me, and now you tried to do it to her." The air shifted again. My chest tightened, realizing what he'd just confessed. He wasn't only standing up for Emily, he was facing his own ghosts. Emily looked up at him, eyes wide. "Daddy, she hurt you too." Mark knelt again this time, not with the watch, but with his truth. His voice cracked raw. "Yeah, baby, she did. She made me feel like I didn't matter. But I promised myself, if I ever had a child, I'd never let it happen again. And today, I kept that promise." The room went deathly quiet. Even the chandelier seemed to stop humming. My mother-in-law's hands shook as she clutched the armrest of her chair. Her power, built on years of control and selective affection, was unraveling in front of everyone. Finally, she whispered almost to herself, "I was just trying to be fair." Fairmark's laugh was bitter. "You lined up children like trophies, handed out gold like a game show host, and then told a 7-year-old she wasn't worthy. That's not fairness. That's cruelty dressed up as tradition. No one defended her. Not this time." Emily's tears slowed her tiny fingers running over the smooth curve of the watch. She leaned against Mark, whispering, "Thank you, Daddy." I swallowed hard, blinking through my own tears. This wasn't just about a bracelet. It was about generations of silence shattering in one night. Mark stood tall, his arm around Emily. "We're leaving," he said firmly. "And when you think back on tonight, remember this love isn't a prize you dangle in front of children. It's what you give freely, or it means nothing at all." We moved toward the door. My heels clicked against the hardwood, the sound echoing through the stunned room. My mother-in-law remained seated, her eyes glossy, her lips pressed into a thin, defeated line. Behind us, murmurs rose, hushed voices, nervous glances, people finally acknowledging what they'd all seen but never spoken. The screen door creaked as we stepped onto the porch. The summer night air wrapped around us, cool and liberating. Emily clutched the watch, holding it to her chest like a shield. Mark's hand found mine, squeezing tight. And for the first time in years, I felt it too, the weight of the cycle breaking. The car ride home was quiet, the kind of silence that settles after a storm. Emily sat in the back seat, her head tilted against the window, the gold watch cradled in her hands. The streetlights flickered across her sleeping face, catching on the tear tracks that had finally dried. Mark drove with both hands gripping the wheel, his knuckles pale. I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his chest rose and fell too quickly. Finally, he exhaled. "I couldn't let her go through it, Claire. Not what I went through. Not again." I reached across the console, resting my hand on his arm. "You didn't just protect her," I whispered. "You protected the boy you used to be." He glanced at me, eyes wet. For the first time, I understood the depth of his silence. All those years, the dinners where he barely spoke, the gatherings he dreaded. Tonight wasn't only about Emily. It was about ending something that had haunted him his whole life. When we carried Emily inside, she stirred just enough to murmur, "Daddy's watch. Makes me feel like a princess." Mark bent down, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "You're more than a princess. You're loved." Downstairs, Mark sat at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. I touched his shoulder, and he looked up at me with eyes full of exhaustion and relief. "We broke it," he said softly. "The cycle's over." And in that moment, I knew he was right. Emily hadn't just inherited a watch, she'd inherited proof that she mattered. And that love, real love, doesn't skip anyone. Family isn't measured in heirlooms or gold bracelets. It's measured in who stands up when it matters most. That night, my daughter didn't just walk away with a pocket watch, she walked away knowing she was worth fighting for. And Mark, he finally silenced the voice that had told him since childhood he wasn't enough. If you've ever seen someone you love treated as less than, you know how deep the scars can run. But you also know the power of saying enough. If this story hit you, share it in the comments, subscribe, and stick around because the next story might be the one you need.